now we're going to show you how to make a door panel for this rusted out door. This is a 57 Chevrolet rear door, and we chose this because we wanted something with a little difficulty. We have an outside curve here and an inside curve here. It just isn't a square door. Now, before we start to do anything about making a panel, we've got to get an area of this stripped. We've got to get the paint off of it. So we're going to use this towel strip. We'll put it in a container here, and we're going to brush some of it on. Now here's a tip. When you're getting ready to strip something, use a sandpaper and rough up the area. That way your stripper will help bite in a little quicker. Now when you're using chemicals like this, you always want to read the label and make sure you've taken all the precautions on the label. I'm going to pour this in here, and then I'm going to get some gloves on because I don't want this to get on my skin. It won't hurt you real bad, but it will burn your skin, and we don't want to get burnt. So while I'm getting my gloves on, Fred, you want to talk a little bit about some of the other stripping methods that they have?
This chemical strip with the brush here is just one way to do your car. There are people who will dip the entire car or dip individual pieces, and that's a great way to do a car. We have a Jaguar here. We have a body that's been stripped and a body that's already just about finished. A lot of people are concerned about that. They hear bad tales about it, where maybe some of the stripper has ran out of some of the cracks and has loosened the paint. We've used that process for years, for 20 years, and we've never had that problem. When you do a body like that, you have to make sure it's washed thoroughly. You have to make sure it's completely dried with an air hose. You blow out all the cracks and crevices. Sometimes you take a torch and you even warm up and heat those cracks to make sure that there's no moisture in them, and you're not going to have any trouble. That's not the only way to do a car, though. We have a sample here. This is a plastic medium.
Fred, be careful here. Don't get this on you.
These people that do this, and there are people around that do this, they can take your car or your door, whatever, and they can blast that car with this with only about 30 or 40 pounds of pressure. They can even, when they hit the glass, it doesn't hurt it. Or moldings, it won't hurt. Not that you want them to do it that way. It won't remove any rusted areas you might have, but it'll strip it down to the bare metal.
It also is good for cars with wooden structure in them because you can't submerge a car with wooden structure in it all the way into a tank, so you want to use that plastic media. That's good.
We have done sandblasting for 25 years. We have never, ever sandblasted an outer panel or a roof or a hood. We have always sandblasted all the frameworks and in the trunk gutters and around the edge of the fender or across the cowl or something like this. If you were to sandblast this area here and you really got on it heavy, tried to remove rust, you would harden this metal to the point where you couldn't hardly work it. And in addition to that, it would probably look like this when you were done. It just heats it and warps it. But sandblasting has its purpose, and it's great. Like I say, all through these areas here. Look at this, is really coming off nice. Did you tell them you don't backtrack on that?
That's right. You brush on once and you leave it alone. If you brush over twice, it breaks the seal and it stops it from working. What we've done here is we've just removed the outer color. We still have the black primer there, and we're going to dispose of this stuff properly. You're not supposed to just throw this out just anywhere. Now what we're going to have to do is put another coat on here so that we can attack this primer. And we're not going to go over this a second time with the sandpaper because we're just going to have a goopy piece of sandpaper if we do. You usually brush this in just one stroke so that you don't break the seal, and that way it'll work quicker. We used to strip these cars either with this chemical And we sent an awful lot of bodies over the years out to get them submerged and cleaned, and we had good luck doing it that way. We just made sure that we sealed all the joints in the body before we painted it, and we never had a problem. Okay, Fred, while we're waiting, why don't you show them that caulking we used to use on the seams to keep the strip tank material from coming out.
This is 3M Body Seam Sealer. It's designed especially for bodies to seal all the seams. It can be painted over also. This also will help hold down any moisture or anything that might still be in those seams. So it's really a good product. There's other people that make this same product, but this is a good product to use.
Okay, now we're ready to do some more scraping, Fred. See if we can get another coat of this stuff off. We're down to the blue. You want to get that box up here and let me get rid of this? It looks like we'll have to do it one more time to get all of this off.
We've taken off the red, and then the black.
Black primer.
And now part of the blue, and under the blue is a red primer.
We're coming along pretty good. Need a little more.
One more
stripper.
application and we got it.
Okay, we got all our stripper off. Looks like somebody's already been grinding on this door. I think this door has been repaired. What we have to do now is get our metal panel that we're going to make this repair with. The best place to get one of these panels is probably at a local body shop. They got the machinery to cut this nice and straight. You need good straight edges, good square edges. If you try to cut this with a tin shears or a tin snips, you're going to have a distorted piece of the metal. So go someplace where they can cut it for you. We measured this to make sure we had the right size piece of metal. And the first thing we got to do is put a bend on this metal. Want to bend about a ½ inch of this over. That's going to make this edge that's going to go over the bottom of the door here. So, since we don't have a metal brake, we're going to do this with some tools that you might have around the house. We've got a couple of pieces of angle iron here, and we put a bolt through this side just to hold it together so it didn't fall all over the place for us. We're going to stick this piece of metal in here, and we're going to leave just a ½ inch exposed on this side. Get about a ½ inch there, and we'll measure and make sure we only got a ½ inch. We don't want any more than a ½ inch sticking out to make our bend. Okay, now we've got our ½ inch measurement. We're going to clamp this in here so it doesn't move. We don't want it to slip. Okay, now we're going to take it back here and put it in the vise. And lock it up real good and tight. We want to make sure it stays tight. We don't want that to slip. Now we're going to put some more clamps on it because the more the better. We've got to keep this piece of steel in here nice and secure. And we'll do that with some C-clamps. Anything that you have around the house, since you don't have a metal brake that would do this for you, do it with these pieces of angle iron. Will save you some money. Really tighten them up tight. You don't want that piece of steel to have any movement inside that 2 angle irons. Now we're going to put a couple of pair of vice grips here too, just anything to get it nice and solid. Okay, now we made a little tool here out of an old pair of pliers just by welding a piece of flat steel on this old channel locks. What we're going to do is use this to bend our steel over. Now you bend this down the complete length of the angle iron carefully so you don't do any damage to the panel down between the angle irons. You'll have to move your vice grips and your C-clamps as you go along, especially when you get ready to do the hammer on it, which we'll do in just a second. Okay, now we got our metal started in the bend. Now what we're going to do is take a hammer and we're going to bend this down and make a complete right angle out of it. We'll start here on this end. And just get it nice and smooth all the way across. You may have to move a C-clamp. Okay, we got our bend made. We're going to take this piece of steel out of this angle iron setup we have here and show you what we've come up with. We've got a nice right angle here. This is going to go on the bottom of the door. Now, what we have to do is make another right angle over here for this side. We're going to leave this side alone because it's the side that's got the inside curve. So we'll get this out and we'll put it back in our angle irons and we'll make another bend right here. Now we got our panel back on the door. We've snapped it on with a couple of vice grips. But now we've got a straight edge here, and the door, of course, has a contour. So what we're going to have to do is take care of that contour, and we're going to do it with the torch. Get a little heat. We're going to snap a vice grips on here just loose and start our bend. We'll heat this edge. What we want to do is try to get this to sort of shrink down so it conforms with the door. And we're actually going to get it red, and we'll work the high spots down with the pliers. We want to shrink the metal up. We got a bulge right here. We want to shrink that up. We want the whole thing to fit right down on the door skin. We're getting a pretty good bend there. I think our vice grips are tight enough. Okay, we've got a nice curve here now. It follows the line of the door. Now what we have to do here, so we're going to mark this, just put a little mark here and right over here, because now we're ready to take the door skin off, and we're going to take our electric grinder and we're going to grind all the way around the edge of this door so we can remove the skin itself. So let's get that off and lay it down on the floor and let it cool. And get our grinder up. Now we're going to grind this edge. We don't want to cut into the door frame itself. If we cut just the skin as it rolls over, we'll get the skin loose. You can see it starting to separate. We got it separated here. We're going to go all the way around from this mark all the way down and around until we have the whole bottom of this door. Okay, I think we've got it loose all the way around. The reason we use one of these electric grinders is it just makes things much quicker. An air grinder is okay, but those doggone things slow down. As you can see, I can cut this real quick with this electric grinder. This panel is completely loose. Now we're going to take our panel that we made and put it back up on there so we can mark our line where we're going to cut the old door skin off. Our curve fits real good. I'm going to clamp that a couple of places so it doesn't slip on us. Just lightly, we don't want to bend this thing any more than we have to. It's good and snug all across the bottom. Now we're going to make a line here, and this is the line we're going to use when we cut this panel off. We'll remove this. Now we're going to drill a hole right about here, start our saber saw in here, and cut this with a saber saw. You want a real nice straight line because you got a real good straight line on your panel. You don't want this to be zigzag or have a lot of openings because you want your weld to be able to cover the whole area. So I'll get a drill and I'll drill a hole and we'll start our saber saw through here and we'll cut this off. Okay, now that's as far as I can go. The rest of this I'm going to have to cut with a die grinder because the inner door skin is real close right there. So we'll get the die grinder. Now you got to watch these. The sparks usually fly out this direction and the sparks will go at least 8 or 10 feet. If you have an automobile with glass or if you have somebody close by, one of your children or somebody else, don't throw sparks on them because you can really hurt them. And this spark will burn right through the windshield of your automobile without any problem. Okay, now we've cut both sides. We're ready to pull this old panel off. Take a look at what we have underneath. As you can see, it's rusted on both ends, and that's because the metal was so close right in here on both ends. It didn't actually rust the door jamb itself, it just rusted through the outside. Another problem you got in the bottom of these doors is all this dirt and what have you that comes down through the glass. It clogs up the drain holes, and that causes rust in the middle of the panel. In this case, we didn't have any rust in the middle of the panel. We only had it over here where the metal was so close that it could start rusting on us right there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to put our new panel up. We're going to clamp it on there, flip the door over so we can make these other two curves. We have to make this round curve and this inside curve. Put that back here and put our other panel back on. It's fitting real good. Nice and close. What we may do before we get ready to weld this, to get a real nice tolerance, we may take a metal file and just shave it here and there just to make sure that we got a real good tight fit. Now, clamp this on here. Make sure it's right in the position. Snap it on. And we're going to turn the door over and get our inside and outside curves made. Boy, it fits good, nice and tight at the bottom. Got a nice tight fit over here. When we get through, we'll take this piece that I'm tearing off here, we'll take the rest of this off of here with a chisel. It's just the inside of that part of that steel. Now what we're going to do is mark a line in here, and we're going to take and cut the excess off of here, take a torch, and we're going to bend this up so we can make our curve. Okay, that's our outside curve. Now we got to come over here and do the same on the inside curve. Got to cut off the excess metal. Okay, got our door skin made. Now what we're going to do is take the clamps off of it and see how it came out. Fits a little snug, that's what we want. Okay, you can see we've got our outside curve over here and our inside curve over here. Now, before we put this panel in our rack to metal finish it, we've got to get a curvature to it. You know, these door panels and these quarter panels are not flat. They have a curvature. The way we're going to get that curvature is to lay it down on an anvil, take a wooden mallet like this, and we're going to panel beat this panel until we have stretched the metal and got ourselves a curvature. That's the way we'll attain that curve that we can put on the door, and we won't have a flat piece of metal going against a curved piece of metal. Now what you do is you just keep on pounding until you've got the curve that you want. Okay, it looks like we got a good panel. We're ready to put this in the rack. Okay, we've got our panel racked up. You've heard us talk about a rack. We invented this thing. This is on a 16-gallon drum, and we put some pipe down inside, pipe that would slide inside of one another, and you can move these four arms in any position you want. You could hold a large hood or a small panel. And what it does is it keeps the part steady while you work on it. It's impossible to do any metal finishing unless you've got something tying this thing down. This thing, we have plans for this. If you want to buy plans for this, we'd be glad to give you the information at the back of the tape. Now, we've got a couple of tools here we're going to show you. We've got a body hammer. We've got some dolly blocks, or bumping blocks they call these. These come in different shapes and sizes. In this case, we're going to use this flat one. And we also have another tool. This is called a bullseye. And we'll talk about this when we use it. And the other tool we're going to use is this Vixen file blade. And we'll show you how this is all done. The first thing we got to do, you notice we have some real distorted metal here where we bent this around. We've got to get this at least somewhat flat. And to do that, we're going to take our dolly block, take the round edge since we're working on this, and we're going to flatten this out a little bit. Now we have a little low spot right in here. We want to bring that up. Put our dolly block on the top. And work the edge. Bring it up a little bit more because we got a little bit of a low spot there. Sometimes we bring it up with the point of the hammer, the pick hammer, with a block like this. And that'll raise the metal all the way around. Now we had a big dip right there and it's rather smooth. The next thing we're going to use is this Vixen file blade. These are expensive blades. They run about $20 new. So you want to learn how to use one of these right. In our place, when we had our shop, they used to call this an idiot stick. And the reason they did is because, would you believe, one of these was pushed over every square inch of sheet metal on every restoration we ever did. If you do that, you'll know why they call it an idiot stick. What you do with a file like this is you set it down, you push it forward, and you pick it up. Don't pull back. That'll dull it real quick. You push it down, and what we're trying to do here is find out where we have some severe low places or high places. And as you can see, if we didn't have this racked up in our rack, we wouldn't have a chance of working this properly. We've got a large area right in here that we've got to bring up to make it nice and smooth. So we're going to start, we'll do that by just hitting around in general. Just go around the whole area, and we'll work our file blade until we start seeing all these places change texture. Now, we have another tool that is real good for this, especially if you have a small spot that you try to hit and you have a hard time hitting it with your pick hammer like this. You can't hit the right spot. This is a sure winner. This is like a gun sight. It's a bullseye, they call it. And when you pull this hammer up, it hits right in the center of the sight. And what you want to do is just gently work around your low places with this. And work your file blade again. We're starting to see results of our work here. We're bringing this metal up evenly all the way across. Now we have to file this complete panel. And when we do, we're going to file long ways in this direction, because this is the way you're going to see your waves and your dents, not this way. This is a little tip. If you're looking down a quarter panel on an automobile, you look the long way, because that's the way you'll see the waves. We're going to file the whole panel. If this were a big roof panel, we would only pick this much at a time to file. Don't attempt the whole thing. Do this much, get it metal worked, and then go to the next spot and work the car that way. Now, if by chance we would have a place on here that was stretched and we'd have to do some shrinking on it, we're going to show you how to do metal shrinking just a little bit later. But right now, we've got to file this panel and finish it up. Okay, we've got our panel metal worked. Now we're going to have to sand it. And to do that, we're going to use this dual action sander. This sander has two different settings. You change it by pulling this cog in the back and flipping it over. What it does is one setting causes the sander to run in an orbital motion. The other setting causes it to act just like a grinder. To do this, we want it in an orbital motion. What we'll do is sand this panel real good before we try to put it on our door. Okay, our panel is all sanded. Feels pretty good. What we'll do is take it out of the rack and take it over to the door, and we're going to install it. Fred, you give me a hand with this. Before we install this door panel on, we want to show you what we did here. We took this wire brush, this inside of this door, got all the rust out of it, and we painted it with this Miracle Paint. This stuff is designed to smother the...
It seals out the oxygen and moisture, and it'll keep the rust from ever growing again.
Yeah, and it's really tough stuff. They give you real good warnings on this, not because it's not that dangerous, but once you get it on, you're not going to take it off with anything. We've done it on this side and on the back side, and we also have done it on the back of our door, on our skin. So Fred, let's see if we can get that up in there. We should have a real nice close line, real tight. That'll have to go over in the end, Fred. Okay. Now, we want to check the underside and make sure it's up tight. There's no gaps anywhere. And we'll get the MIG welder over here, and we're going to start putting some MIG spots through the center of this door, Fred. Let me get the MIG ready. What I'm doing here is putting a MIG spot about an inch and a half apart so that I can hold the heat down. This way I can weld across this door and won't do a lot of damage and warpage. And before this door is finished, I will put a MIG shot right alongside of one another over the complete length of this door. Now that our welding's finished, it's time to fold the edges over on this door. We'll do that by using a flat dolly block and a hammer, and we'll start right here. And we'll start rolling it over. Now you make sure that you fold this metal in. You don't want to have it wide or close up your door opening on you. And when you get all finished here, what you're going to do is put a couple of MIG shots on the inside of this door skin to keep it good and steady. When we get this done, we've got all our welding finished. All we have to do is turn this door over, a little bit of metal finishing and cleaning on the outside, and it's ready for a filler. Okay, got all our welding done. Now what we're going to do is we got to cut this weld down. You can do this with a grinder, or you could do this with one of these. This is an extra wide blade on this die cutter, and what this does is it only concentrates your cutting on the weld itself. Now you have to be careful of this because this will throw sparks a long distance, and you'll need some face protection in order to use this. So I'm going to cut down on this weld. I'm going to grind this complete door with this die grinder. The reason I'm using the die grinder with this wide cutting wheel is that I want to concentrate the cutting right on the weld, not on any part of the door. I don't want to damage the rest of the door. After I cut this once, I'm going to check and make sure there's no pinholes in the door anywhere. If there is, I'll hit them again with a MIG shot. I'll re-grind it with the die grinder. Then I'm going to come back and do a little metal finishing on the door, and it'll be ready for the tape involving lead and fillers, plastic